I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Murray Bartlett, Emmy nominee for the sensational White Lotus. Murray, first of all, mate, congratulations on your Emmy nomination.
Thanks. Yeah, it's feels very surreal. I've never been in this position before, so it's very sweet.
I can imagine. You know what? It's about bloody time that you've been recognised by, a big industry group like the Academy. I've been following your career for such a long time, and isn't it interesting? I mean, I kind of chuckle when I hear, Murray Bartlett's like a overnight sensation and he's a breakout star. I'm like, no, he's been around for a very long time. But I mean, how do you feel about finally getting some kind of recognition like this?
I mean, it's lovely, really, really lovely, and feels wonderful. And I feel very fortunate to have had a long career of doing, mostly stuff that I've really loved with people that I've enjoyed working with. So this is just, this is another chapter for me that I'm, fully loving and embracing. It's always nice to get, acknowledgement for the work that you do. It's also great, I think at this point in my career and life, you have a different perspective on life and career, and it's probably a bit more balanced than when I was in my 20s, say. And so I'm, aware of the ebbs and flows of things, and just to enjoy whatever's happening in the moment. So that's what I'm doing, and this is a particularly, joyous moment with lots of cool things happening for me. So I'm just leaning into that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, you've just also you won the Critics' Choice. You were nominated at SAG. You won the ACTA, which I think is the most prestigious award on the planet. So
It was also a very sweet award to win for me, just because it comes from home, and so that's it's particularly meaningful. It was I was very, very moved by it. So it was,
yeah, absolutely. Actually, how did you find out that you were nominated the morning of? Well, I mean, it would have been wouldn't have been that early on the East Coast, but what was that day like when you found out you were nominated
for the ACTA?
For the Emmy.
Oh, for the Emmy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. I sort of, had in a way pushed. I knew that it was happening on that day, that the nominations are coming out, but I sort of I didn't want to be too fixated on it. And so I didn't know what time the nominations came out. And then I woke up that morning, I was like, I should just find out what time it is, so that I'm not I don't know, feeling this sort of weird anticipation unnecessarily, that I kind of have it framed a little bit. And then I found out the time, and I was like, well, that's like 45 minutes away, so I'm just going to go on a long walking meditation and just sort of put myself in a different headspace and not be too sort of fixated on it. And then halfway through my walk, my phone started blowing up. So yeah, it was I mean, it was a great morning and a great feeling, and I'm super excited. I'm really proud of White Lotus and the entire cast and team. I mean, it's just such an extraordinary group of people. So I feel very happy that the acknowledgement that I'm getting is for something that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, I think that probably makes it even sweeter. And also, 5 of the women were nominated from the cast. 2 of your colleagues, Steve Zahn and Jake Lacy, also nominated. Mike White gets his recognition. That, for me, if it was me, I'd be even more excited for them. Everyone's pretty much. I mean, there was a few people who missed out, but pretty much most of the cast were nominated. That is amazing. That never happens. I mean, so you guys all must be so thrilled.
Yeah. I mean, that seems really fitting to me. It seemed it would be weird for only a couple of us to be nominated, in that I feel like it's such an ensemble show, and it's such a group effort with the music and Mike White's brilliance. And so it if one of us is going to be nominated, a lot of us should be nominated, because we all kind of lifted each other up, and it's such a group piece that you can't, one piece of the puzzle doesn't exist without all the others. So and it also is exciting because that night of the Emmys is going to be a big party for us, because there's going to be so many of us there, which will be just amazing. Yeah, really
It's a
lovely.
great excuse to kind of get back together. You probably, if you have, you know, most casts these days seem to have like group chats and stuff, but to get
Right.
back together at an awards night, you'll be able to get on the booze a little bit and you just have a really top evening. It'll be awesome. I'm
I'm a
really,
total lightweight, so I don't know. But
yeah.
maybe like a
Same.
few tips here and there, but I don't want to, lose my shit.
All right, so just pace yourself. Now,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
fascinated by the Armond character because like you could have gone in so many directions. Obviously, Mike White is just a genius. You've said that a few times about him. The way that you decided to tackle this character and yeah, I'm just really curious to know what was going through your mind when you read all the scripts and you're on set, you're ready to go. What was the plan between you and Mike to kind of infuse this guy with something that felt really authentic to me and real? Like he wasn't just some like caricature. He was really fascinating, and I was dying to know what was going on underneath the surface.
Yeah, that's good to hear that because that's what we were going for, and that's what I tried to put into my audition, and that's the feedback that I got from Mike. Halfway through shooting was like I just felt there was a sort of a there was a the character was tethered to reality in a way that made him feel authentically human rather than a caricature. And he's it is a very big character in a lot of ways, and he is a real showman. And so when I read it, I loved what Mike had written, but I was like, well, I want there to be moments of vulnerability with this character. I want us to understand what's going on behind the facade, and it's not just all craziness. There's quiet moments where we see him just sort of being with himself or being uncomfortable being with himself.
Mm.
And so I think that is what I think Mike does so well, is that he creates these very funny characters, but they're human through and through in a way that's confronting and unsettling. And so it's just sort of finding that balance. And because Armand goes on such a roller coaster ride in terms of the story, and hit some kind of highs in terms, well, literally highs, like he's high at
Yeah.
times, but he's also this sort of showy manager of the hotel. So just sort of trying to find that balance was something that we didn't talk a lot about, but we were both just sort of into, and we played with all sorts of different levels with Armand. But I really made sure to sort of I wanted to make sure that there was moments plotted in the story where it wasn't all frenetic, that there was quiet moments with Armand, and where you did really see him breaking, or his vulnerability. And some of those stayed in the final cut and some of those didn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes we would, Mike is the king of play, so we just, not in all the scenes, but in a lot of scenes, just experimented, just played with different levels, and so we do some where there was some, particularly the moments when he was by himself, like they were really quiet or they were a bit more frenetic or whatever. So we just played, which was it was a great sort of I'm going to say journey. I always feel so cheesy saying journey, but it was a great journey of discovery. Of
Such a
like
journey. I know. It's yeah, I get it. I
it's
use
a
the word.
great
I'm just like, oh,
process of discovery, I guess.
yeah, but it definitely was. And like he initially appears as really unflappable. He's the ringleader of this circus in paradise, and I found him to be so compelling from the get-go. But he obviously becomes more unhinged as the series progresses and spirals out of control. But in those earlier episodes, I really noticed the relatively in control, composed, amenable side of Armand. And I just can't recall whether you've mentioned this in the past, but obviously with the way most series are shot, out of order and so forth, how the hell were you able to navigate the unhinged parts at the end where he's coked out of his mind, and then the beginning bits where he's trying to be, the face of the resort and amenable to these douchebag tourists who are turning up and complaining?
Yeah, it was, because we were shooting during COVID, and just the nature of the way that we were shooting, because we were in a resort that was partially opening up part of the way through. So we had to we had to shoot out, like finish shooting a lot of all of the stuff that was in the common areas of the hotel, which was where a lot of my stuff was happening. So we were shooting completely out of order. So it was basically like taking all the pieces of the show and like cutting them all up into little tiny pieces and then just scattering them across the room, and then like trying to plot it like a bit of a jigsaw puzzle in terms of, for me, one of the things that I really wanted to do was make sure that I was hitting all the notes in terms of where he was of the different drugs that he was taking. And that was tricky because, you know, sometimes I was taking uppers and sometimes I was taking downers, and we were shooting some of those scenes back to back. So I really had a bit of a map of how that stuff was happening, and also emotionally, just like trying to make sure that I was keeping an eye on what had come before and what comes afterwards, and where, you know, I was constantly going back and reading the scripts before we were doing scenes because they were all out of order. And also, you know, Mike has like an incredibly kind of incredible library of a mind that can just sort of contain all that stuff. So I also relied on him to kind of, you know, keep me on track. But it was you know, in the beginning, when I saw the way we were shooting, it was a little daunting, but then that becomes kind of an exciting puzzle to piece together. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, okay, cool. So I've got to do this here and this here. And there is no sort of, you know, continuity in terms of the timeline. So you just sort of embrace it as this amazing jigsaw puzzle that you got to try and keep on top of.
Yeah, I also was thinking like Armond is on his toes, he's being challenged, he's under pressure, and I guess Murray playing Armond is also feeling that way. You're getting up at ridiculous hours, and Jennifer Coolidge was telling me that she had 3 a.m. wake up calls, and she's like, I felt she was saying that she looked like she'd been hit with a shovel for a few hours between the typical. Yeah, and I just thought, you know, that's a lot of, I mean, yes, you're filming in paradise, but it's a COVID shot. You guys are really going to places that make you feel uncomfortable. So that's all really like fascinating stuff. So when you look back, you know, I know production feels like it was 100 years ago now, but what's the thing that you'll probably take with you, you know, for the next few years in your career, in your journey, so to speak, as an actor? What did you most learn about yourself and your skills as an actor from that shoot? Sorry.
You know, I think the biggest thing that I'm always trying to learn, and I really I learned in a different way and was able to kind of lean into it on a different level, I think, in this show, because of the character I was playing, was to not be afraid, and not be afraid to just kind of let go and let things be big, or just like let go as an actor, and really just not feel kind of unfiltered and unlimited. And that's, I think that's what the role called for. So the way that I read it anyway, and the way that I was working with Mike on it. And there's something, and sometimes I think, well, in my mind anyway, I went fully over the top, in some takes. And I'm really proud of that, that to be sort of, to have the courage, or the whatever, just to be willing to just let go and see what happens. And Mike is a champion of that, and he really championed me in that. And I feel proud of the work that we all did in that way of, just kind of leading into the intensity of this story and these characters. So that's something that I take away of just don't be afraid, just go for it. And what's going to happen, you can always pull it back. You can always, if you're working with great people, they'll always have you back. And I've definitely felt that in this situation. So
that's a dream. Yeah, that's a dream, because that's a terribly vulnerable place to be, when you were just really letting go and just completely just smashing it and hoping that you're not going over the top. But I mean, and then it's up to Mike White, the genius, to then work out what he wants to chisel back. So I love
that's the thing about being directed by a genius. You're like, well,
it's pretty good.
What can happen?
Yeah, exactly. What could
You
possibly
got
happen?
me. Yeah.
Yeah. The banter between Jake Lacy as Shane and you as Armond is so priceless because that obsessive feud escalates obviously with every scene and then it culminates in the ending. And if you haven't seen the White Lotus yet, can you go away, watch it, come back? Because we're gonna have spoilers. Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Jake Lacy's as well. He's a top bloke, and he just plays the biggest Karen douchebag that I've ever seen. And I've kind of recognized myself in it a little bit, which means now every time I go to Fiji or Hawaii, I have to be really careful and not to be a Shane. But what was it like, the interplay between you and him? Because it's just, there were sparks flying off the screen.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, you know, this whole cast is so talented and turned out to be really wonderful people, which was lucky because we were, you know, we were stuck together. We couldn't leave that resort for 3-4 months, whatever it was. Yeah, and I mean, those scenes between Shane and Armand are so brilliantly written. The conflict is so clear, and they're just, I mean, they're just great scenes. And Jake is an awesome guy, not a douchebag, but so it turns out plays a really great douchebag. But you know, I think we're similar in some ways in the way that we work, and then he came like raring to go, and I did too. And this was sort of one of the situations where I think Mike had to pull us back because it was like action, and we were like, you know, like at each other. But it was so exciting. I used to like look forward to those scenes, not only because they were great, you know, so well written, but just like it was such a joy playing with Jake because he came like knowing his stuff so well, but willing to play. So we both came, you know, I think we're similar actors in that we tend to possibly be a little, I tend to be a little bit over prepared, but hopefully, you know, I'm willing to like let it go in the moment, and he feels the same. So we just came ready to go at a really good point. Like we started probably a bit too hot, you know, in all of those scenes, and then sort of found the different levels. But it was just great to feel that like heat from your, you know, your sparring partner.
Yeah.
Those were, you know, some of my favorite scenes to do in the show, just because of how awesome he is as an actor and as a character.
It's the best. They're really awesome scenes. Like every scene, Jennifer Coolidge's scenes and Natasha Rothwell's scenes, and they're all amazing. But I just love that interplay. We were talking offline about everybody wants to talk about the poop scene, and everyone wants to talk about the rimming scene, and they are both awesome. I pissed myself laughing. Like, the funniest things I've ever seen.
Right. Yeah.
But what I'd really rather talk about is the end for Armond, because pardon the pun, it was quite gut wrenching. Like when having him stabbed in the chest, in the gut, whatever it was. The look on your face broke my heart. I was so bummed that he was the one that they ended up being in the coffin. And I mean, it's genius. But how did you feel about that? And do you recall the day on set when you had to slink into the bathtub and just literally fade away? It was a real bummer. It was really sad.
Yeah, I agree. I was shocked when I read that it was him. I was one of the people that didn't guess that it was him until like, I mean, as that scene was coming up, I was like, hang on. But I assumed that it was going to be Rachel, you know, Shane's partner, because I was like, oh, well, it sets that up at the beginning, and then we're led to believe it might be this person or that person, but I feel like it's all a kind of a game, and we're going to come back to who we originally thought it was. And I was, equally devastated because I don't know, because he's just like, I identify with him as, you know, the part of myself, and I think the part of all of us that is like, God, this world is just like insane and it's spiraling out of control, and I can't deal with it anymore. And I wanted him to kind of triumph. Part of me wanted him to
Me
triumph.
too.
That's not how the world works, you know, which is why I think it's so fitting that he becomes a victim of it. But and in that last moment when he's dying, I wanted it to be sort of, there's a lot of things in that. Like there's, you know, shock for him and sadness for him, but also like sort of it's funny to him, like, well, I'm stabbed by a pineapple knife, and like, what the hell, like, and also some release for him of like, finally, like, that it's over, even though it's a tragedy and it's like sad and devastating, it's also like a relief to be out of that, like, toxic cycle that he's in. So I think it's a brilliant part of the show, and I think that I wanted to kind of put a lot of things into that moment that are a little bit sort of confusing or sort of contradictory in the things that he's feeling, because I think that there is a lot of release but sadness but tragedy in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, even though the bully walks away unscathed, he's not really, and he'll have that torment for the rest of his life, whilst Armond is like, well, I did my best and now it's time for me to bow and walk away. Brilliant work. Murray, congratulations on your Emmy nomination. I've got everything crossed for you to win in September, or one of your cast members. Have fun on the red carpet if you're going, and thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great talking to you.